All right, well, hello there, everyone. This is Mazske Finance coming to you once again. It is Tuesday, April 19th, year 2022. And once again, I have a very special guest. I've been looking forward to this guest for a long time now. You've heard me talk about, not her specifically, but her organization. And today I have with me Megan from Royal Legal Solutions. So Megan, go ahead and tell everyone hi. And if you want to, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, welcome and thanks, Mark, for having me on the show today. So guys, my name is Megan Templeton. I am a consulting attorney with Royal Legal. I've been consulting with Royal Legal Solutions now for about 3.5 years. Have been practicing as an attorney inside of the real estate investing field, though, for much longer. Also maintain a practice here in Central Alabama, where I'm based out of. And so, inside of that, my practice areas with Royal specifically have been around asset protection, estate planning, working with real estate investors to make sure they get that finance freedom temple really built up for them and have all the right structures in place. So it's a lot of fun. I love what I do. It's working at Royal Legal Solutions. We get to work with folks like Mark a lot, and so I think that's a sweet spot of being able to help investors.
All right, that sounds good, because I came in contact with Royal. I think it was back in 2019. So it's probably the first time you and I talked, was maybe late 2019 or somewhere around there. And I know I've talked with Scott a couple times on the phone and et cetera, et cetera. But I've mentioned on my channel before, I have my rental properties in both trust and child series LLCs. And I've explained it just a little bit, but I'm not a lawyer at all. So maybe if you could explain for my audience exactly what it is I'm talking about when I mention my properties are inside of trust and LLCs and why that's important for a real estate investor.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing we believe at Royal Legal and that we put into all of our structures is there's two really components to it. You've got the liability protection component, which is what you hear most folks talk about, but there's also an anonymity component to that as well, because if someone can't find you, obviously it's a lot harder for them to litigate against you. And so we work to build our structures to having those two types of protections in mind. And so with that, we do use a combination of revocable trust alongside of LLCs. And so we've got a couple different models way we do it. There's different types. There's a hub and spoke model. There's a traditional LLC operating model. And then there is the Series Llc model, which is what you're touching on now, Mark. And so for the Series Llc model, what it is, and there's only certain states that allow you to form them, but you can use them nationwide because of the full faith and credit clause. So this is something that anyone's able to use. So we'll set it up in one of the allowed states. Typically we use Texas because it's got great protections in place. And what that looks like is you've got one filing that gets filed with the Secretary of State for Texas, telling them you want to have this Series Llc, who's involved with it, what the address is for it. And so once you get that formation paperwork filed, then you're going to draft your operating agreement, which is just going to be your typical operating agreement, laying out who's involved, what's the percentage of ownership, all of the important clauses, get those protections in place. And the way that the Series Llc functions is a little different than your typical LLC, and that's really where the benefit comes in. So with your typical LLC, you've got one bucket. It is just one bucket for liability protection purposes. So if you're going to put an asset into it, it's going in that one bucket. A Series Llc is different. It allows you to create what we call child series underneath of it. So they're really many entities. So you've got what we call the parent Series Llc. That's the one we talk about that gets filed. But underneath that, you can create as many of these individual child series as you want to. And those are infinitely scalable. You're never going to run out of the ability to create them. And so what we do inside of that is we put one asset per child series. So instead of having that one liability bucket that all of your assets are in, now you're going to have multiple little buckets, and they're only going to hold one asset. That way, if property A ever gets litigated against, it's the only thing in the property A bucket. So they can't come against any of your other properties. And so that's the benefit of minimizing out. Functionally, what that looks like is those child series LLCs, they don't have to be filed with the Secretary of State. It's an internal document. You draft it up, you keep it yourself. And there is a document that needs to be drafted. So you need to have that paperwork done, but it's not something you file. So you're going to avoid another filing fee. You've got some anonymity in place because you don't have that public filing, letting people know that that LLC is out there. And so inside of that, what we do is, like I said, we put the property per child series, but we add another layer in there. So you've got the child series that we then flow down to a land trust. And the land trust is a typical revocable trust. We use it for anonymity purposes. And the reason being, we don't really want people to even know you have a Series Llc. Well, if we didn't use a land trust, the Series Llc would be listed on your deed, on title. So since we were trying to avoid that, we then create a land trust. So the land trust is listed on title. And there's a couple ways we can structure the parties inside of that land trust. So you've got your grantor, your trustee, and your beneficiary. And we can make sure that the names that are for those folks are going to be anonymous. So when someone looks up your property, they're going to see this land trust. They're going to say, I don't know what this land trust is. I don't know who this trustee is, who actually owns this property. So you've got your anonymity in place. Well, if they were ever able to pierce that, well, then it goes to this child series level where you actually only have the one asset. So your full portfolio is not at risk at that point. So you've got the liability minimization, liability protection, you've got anonymity inside of that. And it's also something that streamlines your costs, fees, and bookkeeping. So with the structure, like I said, you only got the one-time filing for the parent Series Llc, apart from the deed recording fees and typical real estate costs you'd have. But so you've got one filing, makes it easy to maintain on a yearly basis because you don't have individual LLCs that have compliance filings. It's still just the one compliance filing a year. You can also use one set of books and one set of banking. So like you only have one bank account for it if you want to. So it makes it easy operationally, but it also gives you the protections you need. So that's kind of a high level overview, Mark. Any questions about any of that specifically?
Okay, well, I know for me, I'm fairly familiar with it because you and I have talked before, and I've talked to Scott and et cetera, et cetera. So let me think real quick. So each individual property is in a revocable trust. So if someone looks up a property, they will find the name of that revocable trust. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So on deeds, on title, the way when you title something into a trust, it'll list an individual's name, comma, trustee of the XYZ land trust. And so that's the component I was talking about where we make sure that trustee on the deed is someone who's going to be anonymous to you. So we call it using a nominee trustee. We have folks that we use regularly at RLS for that purpose. But you're exactly right. What's going to be on that title is going to be the trustee of the land trust you're using.
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. And so let's say worst case scenario, someone was able to, I think you said the word, pierce that trust. Then they're going to find that Child Series LLC, which is not going to be my name. It'd be just whatever the name of the LLC is. So does that mean, say it was a frivolous lawsuit, do you think, would that stop right there, or would they keep digging farther and farther just to find out who the owner is?
So if it's a frivolous lawsuit, honestly, it's probably going to stop at the very beginning. They're most likely not going to get past the land trust. And the reason being is any attorney who is looking at a frivolous case and they're trying to decide, is this something I want to take? Am I going to get paid for this? They're going to pull up that land trust, see there's not a lot of information to find out from there, and realize they're going to have to go through a ton of discovery. So there's going to be a bunch of court costs associated with it, a lot of time associated with it. And if it is truly frivolous, it's a smaller case, likely it's not getting past that stage. Now, if it is a case that the attorney believes might have some merit to it, or they think they can track it to someone who might be a high value individual, that's when they may actually go through the process of getting those records, figuring out what that land trust is connected to. But then you're right, they're going to hit that child series level, realize it's inside of an LLC that owns no other assets, so there's nothing for recovery. So it's likely that's going to shut it down at that stage as well.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Now, what if, just for argument's sake, what if someone knows who I am and they say, well, we know he owns real estate. We're going to try to sue this person individually to go after his real estate. And it's over something, maybe it's frivolous, or maybe they fell down the steps in a rental house or something. If they're coming after me directly, then what would happen?
So it's an end game from the very beginning, but at least for the structures we use, because we don't put anything inside of your name. The name of the game is really to get those assets in the name of an entity. So if they're trying to sue you personally, what they're going to find out is you don't own any of those properties personally, so there's nothing for them to recover.
Okay, sounds good. And then also, so you got the trust, you got the Child Series LLC, but I think you said no one knows the name of that Child Series LLC. So is there anything above that helps hide these child series?
Yeah, so above that's going to be the parent series LLC, the one that actually gets filed with the Secretary of State. And so you have to have the parent level. That's what gives you the permission to create those individual child series. But even inside of that, you can do it where the series LLC parent level, the one that is filed, is anonymous as well. So a structure we use frequently to achieve anonymity at that level, at the top LLC level, is we'll use an agent trust as the owner of that LLC. So if someone were going to pull up the series LLC paperwork that's been filed with the state, because that is public record, what they'll see is that the owner is going to be listed as, Real Estate 101 Trust. Well, they're not going to have any information on that trust. And that revocable trust document is an internally held document. It's not publicly published anywhere. So no one knows that you're actually the grantor, trustee, beneficiary, any of those roles inside of that trust. So ultimately, while they may be able to figure out the series level name by a public filing, they're not going to know who owns it, who's connected to it. So it's really an end game if there. I mean, they've got just enough to know that that LLC exists and has a name, but not actually who they can get to through that LLC.
Okay. All right. So this is sounding better and better to me. So another question would be then, we have the child series, we have the parent, we got the trust and everything. But say when rent's paid to me, are they paying it to Mazske Finance? Are they paying it to the parent LLC, or exactly what's happening there?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can do that. You don't want them to pay it to you individually. That does open you up to liability, because if they're paying you individually, then there's a contract between you and this person, and that gives them reason to litigate. Now, if there's a contract between you and this person individually, it's not going to put your properties at risk, because like we talked about, those properties are going to be inside of an entity, but it does put your personal assets at risk. So that could be a primary residence, your vehicles, your bank accounts, etc. So you don't want to go at it with letting them pay you rent directly and having that operations property management piece individually. So let's take that one off the table. The next one that you can look into is using a third-party property manager, which is what a lot of folks do. That's kind of the middleman layer, right? And that's a good option. That does give you someone who is public-facing with the tenant, so you're not interacting directly. It also gives you someone to help with the operations pieces, things like that. But it can be kind of pricey. If you're someone who is getting started, or you are remote and don't have someone in that area you trust yet, you may not want to go that route. So the third option, the one that we use frequently, is we will set up another LLC. So you end up having kind of a dual LLC. You've got the Series Llc, which is your asset holding LLC. And then you've got the second LLC that's going to be what we call your operations LLC. And it really serves as a property management type of entity. So it's not going to hold any assets. You want to make sure it's a shell, and that includes keeping the bank account low. Its purpose really is just for public facing activities. So that's going to be things like interacting with tenants. It's going to be working with contractors, paying bills. Anything public facing goes through that operations LLC and not your asset holding LLC. And so with that operations LLC, what it would look like is we could set it up again with anonymity. We can put an agent trust where who as the owner of this LLC. So if someone pulls this LLC up on the Secretary of State's website, it's going to show a trust, but they're not going to have the information about who's involved in that trust. And then on the day-to-day, when you are interacting and running through this LLC, you'll hold yourself out as just a manager. You're not going to disclose that you're an owner. So you're still involved in it, but they're not going to know, do you own this property? Do you own this LLC, et cetera? And so there's still some anonymity involved in that. And what it really comes down to is if there's ever a problem, so someone does slip and fall down the stairs, well, they're going to sue who their rental agreement is with. Well, that's going to be the operations LLC. So if they do that, they're going to try to sue the operations LLC, realize it doesn't own anything. There's no assets there. The bank accounts are actually really low. We keep them at just operating costs. So there's nothing for them to recover. So it's another layer of separating yourself and your assets from any type of activities that are risky. Now, I do want to point out the important piece inside of that is a lot of folks will say, well, Megan, how do I have an operations LLC that's collecting rent, doing these activities, and then I have an asset holding LLC, and they're not connected, but I'm using them for each other? And so the way you do that is it's akin to if you were going to work with a third-party property manager. So if you're working with someone else, you're going to have that contract between you and that third-party property manager to manage your properties. And then that property manager is going to have a contract with the tenant for rent. So what you would do is you would actually create a contract between your property and which will be in the land trust name, and then your operations LLC that allows that operations LLC to take actions on behalf of the property. So it's still connected in the sense it has a legal contract to be able to work for each other, but they're not connected in the sense that it doesn't merge. You can't get to your assets by going through the operations. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. That sounds really good. Well, I'm in a mastermind group, and I talk to other investors and try to encourage them to put their rentals. Basically, I tell them to try to contact you guys to put their rentals in, trust and LLCs, just like you've done with me. But a lot of them tell me, they'll say, well, I'll do it when I get bigger. Maybe when I get 20 rentals, I'll do it. Or if I get really big, I'll do it. Or some investors will say, I don't need that protection. I self-manage, and I know I'm a very good landlord. I do everything to make sure I'm not liable. And I have my landlord insurance, and I also have an umbrella policy with $2 million worth of coverage covering all of my rentals. What would you, and say that was me telling you that, what would you say? Could you tell me anything that would change my mind on why I may need LLCs?
Yeah, well, so, and we hear that a lot, and those are common objections. I think there are some gaps in the thinking inside of that. And it's stuff that you may not be thinking inherently because it's not stuff that's top of mind for you. But so now let's start with, the insurance component. That's something we hear a lot is, well, I've got property insurance, I've got umbrella insurance, I've got high policy limits. Why do I need these entities? If anything happens, they'll just go to my insurance company. Well, I think it's twofold. One, you're relying on probably lawsuits not being common, probably not happening often. And inside of that, statistics tell us that if you're an investor for 10 plus years, you have a 90% chance of being sued. It just is the name of the game. It can be a low risk activity, but inherently it is a moderate risk activity. You're going to have somebody operating in this home, so you're likely to be sued at some point. So I wouldn't bank on not having someone bring a lawsuit or not having many against you. I think it's better to have protection in place to fight that. The second thing is, with insurance, you're dealing with a corporation. You're dealing with a company who is out there to make money, and they make money by you paying them premiums and then them keeping that money in their pocket. Well, every time they have to pay out on a claim, they're giving away that money that they want to keep in their pockets for their profits. And so, not to say that insurance companies are nefarious by any means. I mean, I definitely think that they are doing their best in paying claims, but there are sometimes, the policies are written where there are various components that will make the claim not valid. For example, if you haven't paid your premium in the last month, you're maybe late on a premium. Well, that might be a reason to not pay it. Or if you haven't done a certain type of check on the property. So there's just a lot of components to make sure insurance is intact and ready to pay out. And then also the adjuster is going to be convinced this is a claim they should pay out on. Well, their goal is looking really not to pay or to pay as little as possible. And I don't want to chance my protection on a corporation who needs to keep the money in their pocket. And I want to be clear, and I'm not, I think insurance is a great idea, but I would consider it your second layer of defense. You just want to make sure you've got something ahead of that, because insurance can be unpredictable if it's going to pay out, how much it's going to pay out, if your limits are enough. So with that, the next objection we hear is when you noted on, which is, I'm a small company right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to scale, how quickly, when, that kind of thing. The structures we set up are scalable. It's something that you can grow your business with. And I think even if you are a small operation, 1-2 properties kind of thing, that's still an investment for you. And likely if you are someone who has a smaller portfolio, that's a bigger investment for you personally, because you are getting started. You're trying to build that capital. So I would want to do my best to protect the investment you've made, the time investment you've made. And so an LLC is a good thing to have in place from the beginning. It's also easier to scale a structure correctly than try to redo it on the back end. So we tell folks, if you can get in there and get it done early, something that is easy and efficient, cost efficient as well to scale, which is the kind of things we use, you're going to have a better chance at making sure it's set up correctly in the long run when you do have that portfolio of 20, 40 properties. And then the last objection that you kind of touched on is, well, I'm a great landlord. There's probably nothing going to come up. And we've had people say that all the time, and I fully believe it's true. I would say I'm probably a great landlord for my properties. What comes inside of that, though, is there are things that are just outside of your control. Human nature being the most basic one is you're dealing with someone else. And you don't know what their past experience have taught them is something they need to sue about. You don't know how they're going to use your property. So they may have a use you didn't anticipate that they then ran into issues with. So you don't ever want to put your persona on someone else and expect them to act in a way that you would when they're on their property. And I think that's the mindset of I'm a good landlord. And what that means is people typically say, well, I've got my records intact, I do my inspections, etc. Well, say you had a storm 2 nights ago and the storm knocked over a tree, it was loose and you weren't anticipating, but now that tree is fallen on the house. And it's hurt someone or it's damaged their property. Well, you didn't anticipate that. And that's not you being a bad landlord. That is the shifting of circumstances. And so, I fully believe you can be a great landlord, but this is an additional layer of protection on top of that. So it just means you got a better chance at really nothing coming of any type of lawsuit. So, we hear those objections a lot. I think they are solid ones to be considered, but I think they are ones that can easily be overcome by just this idea of you are working with other humans. And so you've got to be careful when doing that.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Well, just listening to you, if I was a new investor and I was just getting started, I'd never talked to an attorney before, I'd probably try to reach out to you. So would you like to tell us if someone's watching this, they want to reach out to you or reach out to Royal Legal, what's the best way to get in contact with either you or Royal Legal?
Yeah, so the best way in general to get in contact with us is go to our website. It's royallegalsolutions.com. On our homepage, we have a quiz that it'll ask you questions about yourself and your portfolio. And what that allows us to do is make sure you get connected with the right folks. Because, for example, if you are a commercial investor, we're going to have you meet with a different attorney than if you are a residential investor. Or if you're in syndications, that's going to be someone else on our team because we are a specialized firm. We want to make sure we get you with the resources that are going to be the most high value for you. So the quiz is the best way to do that. If you want to connect with me directly, I'm happy to do so as well. It's Megan@royallegalsolutions.com. That's MEGAN. And I'm happy to set up any calls or, answer any questions you guys might have.
Yeah. All right, that sounds good. And what I'll do in the description for this video, I'll put the Royal Legal Solutions website there. So the link will be in the description below. So
that's awesome. Thanks, Mark.
All right, cool. Megan, I do appreciate you so much for appearing on this channel. So we're going to wrap this up pretty soon, brother. Any final thoughts? Anything well, here's one question. You may have said this already, but if I'm getting all these rentals and they're all inside these different child series LLCs, when I do my taxes, I've heard other investors say they have to do a tax return for every single LLC they have. Is that what I do?
It's not. So that's actually another one of the big benefits for using something like a series is, when you have multiple individual traditional LLCs, they do require one tax filing per LLC because it's got its own EIN. It's considered its own entity. Excuse me, Mark. With the Series Llc, it's got one EIN at the parent level and everything flows up to it. So you've got one tax return unless you have partners involved and then it runs into K1s and things like that. But if it's just you or if it's you and a spouse where it's a disregarded entity, you've got one tax return to do. So it makes your taxes a lot simpler and a lot cheaper for tax prep.
All right. Well, this is sounding better and better. So I appreciate this. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. So any final words you might have for the audience?
I don't think so. I mean, I would just tell people, as you're growing your business, just make sure you've got a good team around you, whether you want to have like a CPA who you can ask tax questions to, having a business attorney who you can ask questions to. I think just creating that scalable structure is always my most prevalent advice for new investors because the end goal is to have a lot of properties. And so you want to start smart so you don't have to go back and redo anything at the end.
So, all right, that sounds good. All right, Megan. Well, once again, I do appreciate you appeared on my channel and talked with me and answered all my questions. And we've talked to Scott, tell him I said hi because one of these days I'm going to get to your area. I'll probably meet you, and one day I'll get over to meet Scott as well. So,
that sounds great.
All right. Well, thanks again. All right, everyone. Well, we do appreciate you watching. So both for Megan with Royal Legal and for Mazske Finance, we will be signing out. So as always, take care of yourself. Stay safe and do start investing. So Mazske is signing out.